wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. We praise Allah, we start in His name. I seek refuge in Him from the evil that is within me and the evil that is outside of me. I ask God Almighty to bless this occasion, to grant us true understanding of Islam. For the Muslims, we ask Allah that He grants us His proper application in life, that we always walk a path of good manners, so that He is always pleased with us. Those with whom God is pleased, they are going to be successful according to our religious view. They are going to be successful not only in this life, but also in the next. It's going to be hard to actually beat the spontaneity of the previous speaker, at least, Brother Nabil. But that's something lovely about it. First of all, when Abdul Al-Aqiqi mentioned a list of thanks, that to me, when I was sitting there, I thought this is the true Islamic character, what Islam wants from us. Because I think most of us Muslims will be able to recollect the hadith, the tradition of the Prophet, may God's peace be on him, that a person does not truly thank Allah or God unless he thanks the people. And so it was really nice to see a lot of thanks being given to those whom they ought to be offered. And that's an Islamic trait or quality. And then the few mistakes here and there, inventing Brother Nabil or what have you. On that kind of slight nervousness, that kind of naturalness, I think that speaks for sincerity. And I hope I have that sincerity tonight, to be natural and spontaneous and not try to impress anyone by being artificial, showing off and so forth. Because that to Muslims really spoils everything. You know, we all feel nervous. Feeling nervous is actually part of being honest. Because we don't know everything and we cannot possibly know everything. It's a part of humility as well. Because I'm sure there are so many amongst you here, so many people here today, there are amongst you some who can teach me a lesson or two despite my so-called long list of accolades or whatever I was going to go through, which mercifully he didn't. Alhamdulillah, praise be to God. Now, to come to the meat of the talk, we are meant to discuss Islam, the basics. And I will start talking about the 5 pillars, which most, if not all, the Muslims will know about. And I could talk about the 6 articles of faith, and I brought a little PowerPoint slide thing, but I'm going to do that. I'm not going to do that. I think if I tell 2 or 3 stories, let's look at my bundle of notes, a lot of it shows I'm not really that learned, because I have to carry notes with me. It's not in my head. But the point is, if I tell 1 or 2 stories and underline the principles, that may, inshallah, elicit or invoke questions. And we can have a conversation, because that's what we want, dialogue and conversation. We spent the last 3 months, or the winter months, working with 7 churches in Suffolk, mainly in Ipswich, trying to look after homeless people. And last night was Thanksgiving at Christ Church, and so 7 Muslims turned up from our organization, because we took an active interest in trying to do this noble work for the sake of Allah, but with the Christians in a common aim of benefit to humanity. Half the people who took advantage of the night shelter in the churches were East Europeans, not even local indigenous people. But that's regardless, whether Muslims, non-Muslims, black, white, blue, brown, we don't care. That we could work together with Christians on something common to the need of the public, our society. And last night was remarkable because the bishop actually acknowledged our thanks to him in public, Bishop Nigel Stock, and Reverend Paul Daltrey. I mean, he spoke very highly of us. And I got a phone call from Canon Anne Alcott saying how wonderful it was, shall we have perhaps more participation next year? And these kind of things, to some people, I know one Muslim complained and said, what were you as a Muslim doing in a Christian service? And that is entirely antithetical what I have now developed into or grown into understanding Islam. That is not what Islam is about. Islam is really about, as Brother Nabil very passingly said, it is about engagement in the community through actions of benevolence. And that's what defines the character of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. That he was sent as a mercy not only to the Muslims, but as you mentioned, he was instructed, but from his natural self, he was kind towards all, including dogs and, may I say, pigs. To the extent that when he came to Mecca, and when Mecca was opened, we say conquered or opened, there was a dog feeding his litter. And the entire Muslim army under his command at that time was asked to halt the march in order not to disturb the dog feeding its litter. So after the dog had finished suckling the puppies, then the army moved on. Or if you saw perhaps a bird fallen off, a fledgling, falling out of the nest, and the mother bird hovering up overhead, all agitated and disturbed, he would restore it. Did he take part in battles? Yes, he did. 54 expeditions and battles. Was he a pacifist? No, he wasn't. But the point is, was he a contradictory character? And the answer is no. So at one point he was loving towards birds and bees, another point he's hacking off people's heads. No, he didn't. But he did take part in combat. And he was known as the bravest warrior. Something defined his character. And if you want to learn Islam, of course there are posters outside, there are many people here, and I'm sure there are non-Muslims who know a lot about Islam that many Muslims don't know. Because we've obtained sometimes our PhDs in Islamic themes from places like SOAS, School of Oriental African Studies, where the tutors are not Muslims, and they can give you tafsir or explanation, exegesis of the Quran, and they're not Muslims. So if you want to have 5 pillars, 6 articles, basic things like that, we can. But the point is, it's about what is Islam really and how it ought to be understood and practiced, especially in our context. And for myself and my children, my extended family, we are British, if not English, because some people have a problem with that. Sometimes they're into skin color because of my looks and features, and how can you be English when you're not white too? Well, of course you are. But it has to be in our context. This is my country. Britain is my country, not Malaysia, not Bangladesh, not Saudi Arabia. This is my country. And I have to live and die here. I have a choice to go wherever I want, but do I want to? No, I don't. And that can be a discussion. Why would you go elsewhere? What's so nice about Britain, or what's so great about this country? We're going to talk about that. So the ethos of Islam is that the Prophet as the Prophet had defined, peace be on him, لِكُلِّ دِينِ خُلُقْ وَخُلُقُ الْإِسْلَامِ الْحَيَاةِ. Every religion, every way of life, we can say, ideology has an ethos, something that lends it its color, flavor, its essence. And that is modesty or humility. We are told in the Quran to walk with humbleness. Don't walk as if you can rend the earth asunder by the stomping of your feet. So we are supposed to be people who are engaged in work of common benefit. So let me start with the first story. And this story, which is well known amongst Muslims, is about Umar. And we normally say, may God be pleased with him, radiallahu anhu. And if it is not a sin or anything, it might get cumbersome saying so every time. But Umar, may God be pleased with him, he said, well, when he went to receive the keys from the Christian patriarch in Jerusalem at that time, things happened. That's history. We can't run away from it. Some were nice, some things were not so nice, and we should not feel guilty but learn lessons and look forward to developing our character, which does not repeat the mistakes, the heartaches and the pains and sufferings of the past. Because we're not asked to just duplicate like monkeys whatever had transpired, because that happened to be done by Christians or Muslims or Jews or what have you. So when Umar went to receive the keys, he went in a very humble manner. And he had his attendant actually ride the donkey, and he was walking next to him. And the Christian patriarch was amazed by that sight. And here he is, supposed to be the caliph and the most powerful man, and he's coming in such a humble way. And the Christian patriarch, out of the goodness of his character, actually asked him to pray in the Holy Sepulchre, inside the church. And he refused. And some Muslims might think, oh man, Johnny Good, that's what he should have done, because that shows his zeal for Islam and his contempt for Christianity or something. How could he pray in a dirty place or something? No. Umar explained. And we must remember, Umar, may God be pleased with him, is known for his strict adherence to the truth of what he understood to be Islam. His attachment and loyalty to the Prophet, and his very rigor with which he defended the way of the Prophet. So he was known as a learned man and a strict man. And sometimes some people would run away from him, seeing him, because he might get told off or something. But he was actually very gentle. And he said, I prayed outside. If I had prayed in your sanctuary, my followers and those who come after me would have made that as an excuse to turn this into a mosque. So he thought about the status of that place and why that place should not become something different. And in honor of, or out of consideration for the future generations of Christians. He didn't pray there to prevent Muslims from perhaps turning that into a mosque. Was that a faithless thing to do? Ungrateful thing to God? Something disloyal to Muhammad, peace be on him? That is the wisdom of somebody who has spent time being the close aid of Rasulullah, messenger of God, peace be on him. And then the Christian patriarch, he said, today, because of your justice, because of your faith, your wisdom and truth, 4 characteristics he identified. You have received the key of the holy city. But for how long will it remain in your occupation or in your hands? When will this sacred place come back to us again? At the very least, we can admire that he was able to be frank and express his emotions. That he's not happy to pass the key on. He's missing it. And he'd like to have that place back again. So, whatever the relationship, they could be open and honest. And the second feature of Islam, and that's fundamentally important, we feel, having worked a little bit on Nabil said about Ipswich and Suffolk. We are open, we are honest, and we can discuss anything controversial, and we deliberately say to people, please be politically incorrect. Please say something insulting. Just sitting there trying to be polite, we should be. But get it out of the system, let's talk. I'm not going to slap you, you won't slap me. Why are we sitting together? To have a fight? No. It's about dialogue. And there are things which are bothering us, things which we misperceive, things which we are confused about, things which can't believe you can do that. Can Muslims do that? Are Hindus about this kind of thing? Do Jews really are made up of stuff like that? Let's talk about it. Because much of the stuff that is around us is based on nothing. Fictitious, malicious stuff. Anyway, how long will you have the keys in your hands? When will it revert back to us? And so Omar replied, today indeed we have taken over the keys, this place of worship, with these 4 qualities. First is acknowledgement of a set of common values. He didn't say, well, no, they're Christian values, my Muslim value, no. Yes, indeed, these are the 4 qualities, characteristics civilization should have, noble characters have, people of God have, regardless of how they define God. Oneness through Trinity or singularity in our strictly monotheistic fashion, the Islamic way. It is because of these 4 qualities of faith, wisdom, faith in God, wisdom, justice. Wisdom assumes there's a bit of intelligence being put into play. Human agency is there. Wisdom, justice, and truth, we have regained the city. As long as these 4 qualities exist in Islam. Well, Islam, what is Islam? It's not a living, walking, talking being. I mean, the Quran is there, and we say it will never be altered, and has never been altered. The prophetic narrations are preserved in books, thousands of them. Islam is nothing except people. He means people. People who are believing in this creed and representing it in their lives. So when he says in Islam, it means people. That's what he said. As long as these 4 exist in Islam, as long as the Muslims have these 4 in their hands, they will retain the city. But when these qualities depart from Islam, the place of worship will change hands again. I chose this on purpose, of course, not by accident, because there was a lot of discussion and talk, and Palestine and Gaza and Israel. I mean, all these things figure a lot in discussion, especially amongst Muslims. You have to remember this. Islam should foster and refine these 4 key qualities of being a human being, which we share with the Christians and the Jews and people of other faiths as well. We need to look at ourselves. When you say the Prophet sent us a mercy, I went to Harrow last night, and we were talking about community integration and stuff like that. It wasn't council funded, so it's nothing artificial like that, cohesion project or something. It's the Sri Lankan Muslims themselves want to be part of the society, the community. And it was so wonderful to see kids, not talking about we are not terrorists and all the stereotypical things. They were talking about how and why we should really be proud to be Muslims, but as British Muslims. No reference to terrorism. There's no need to feel like that all the time. No reference to us and them. So I asked them, I posed 3 questions to them. What do you think? And I had a set of notes, copies in here, all these kind of technical details and references from some social study or research paper from some council, whatever they have done. I just ditched that all, and I said, let's just ask. Let me ask the audience. What do you think is one of the most important factors for getting on with each other and being understood? And the first person to speak was about a 10-year-old boy. And he said, talking, communication. So I then said to the elders, what do you think we should speak? Which language do you think we should speak? You all speak Tamil. I can read, I can speak Bengali, a bit of Arabic, and my son and daughters, and they know Chinese, Korean, Mandarin, all sorts of stuff. We are in Britain. Personally, I'm fed up of listening to Bengali and Gujarati and Urdu sermons in our Friday prayers. I can understand Urdu and Gujarati and non-Gujarati, Bengali. I'm fed up of it. We're in Britain. What language do you think we should speak? So he said, it should be English, shouldn't it? I said, you're asking me or are you kidding me? It is English. But don't you know in the Quran, God has said that He did not send any prophet before Muhammad, peace be on him, except in the language of His people? Every single prophet from the dawn of mankind, humanity, from the time of Adam till at least the time of Jesus Christ, peace be on him, and certainly Muhammad, peace be on him, they all spoke in their regional dialect or language or vernacular. So don't get all politically uptight because Gordon Brown once upon a time in 2007, when about 8, he said something about those who come to stay in this country. It should happen naturally. It's not a political statement. You don't like hearing it, but why do you live here? But that's the point. We should communicate. And do so, inshallah ta'ala, God willing, in a way which makes the truth clear. So is it just telling? The next question was, do we just tell them? Islam is beautiful. And we have done wonderful things in the past. And we are great, we are not awful like you think. It's a press that gives us a bad name. Do you think we are sometimes bad examples? Let's do some self-criticism. And I have read 2 books on this, commissioned by Romano Prodi at that time. It's rather costly, these kind of books, and hardbound books. I don't know why they're so costly. But they did a European-wide study, the commission, to find out, it's an issue of Muslim presence. It's almost like the Jewish question is becoming slowly. What is the main difficulty? It came down to communication. But the next thing was, the Muslims, that's the accusation, if you like. They are not able to be self-critical. So I'm going to break this. I'm going to do it right now in the Sri Lankan mosque, with 250 people sitting there, with 30, 40 kids as well. Let's self-criticize ourselves. It's not hanging our dirty linen outside the public for the people to see, so embarrassing. No, we are all Muslims in here. There wasn't a single non-Muslim in that mosque or Islamic center. And we do self-criticism. And it's wonderful when we start doing that. Because it begins to make us realize that we own certain problems because of just purely bad behavior. So good manners is refreshing to see. And maybe I'm getting emotional and because I'm sentimentally perhaps more gifted now being older, but good manners touch me much more than they used to 20 years ago. And that's the legacy or effect I want to now, inshallah, God willing, leave behind for the people, Muslim students certainly. And Prophet Muhammad, peace be on him, taught us throughout his life to be self-critical. That's the basis of turning back to God. Repentance, root of that is regret. Are there things that we believe as Muslims that are regrettable in our lives because the way I spoke to someone or I didn't take advantage of an opportunity to make a good impression, or because I myself was an instrument in bringing about disrepute against God and His Prophet, in the name of God and His Prophet, which is even more ridiculous. So Islam is like that. Now let me read you this story, inshallah. That is about the 4 qualities, the so-called receiving the keys from the Christian patriarch by Umar radiallahu anhu. This is Ja'far ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu. Ja'far, God be pleased with him, went off to Abyssinia. Imam Malik is a prominent savant of knowledge in Islam, in early Islam, one of the founders of a school of jurisprudence, widely followed. Anyway, so he actually said that although he does not fully understand if the tradition, the report from the Prophet Muhammad is authentic or not, but he still abides by what it says, which is, do not harm the Abyssinians if they leave you in peace. Why? Apparently the Prophet said that. Why? Because a large number of Muslims, when they were persecuted, as you must know, took shelter in a Christian land, Abyssinia at that time, Ethiopia now, and they were accommodated very well, almost like our present-day asylum seekers in Britain, when the others are chasing them. Even now we have problems sending back people to certain countries because of torture laws or what have you. The so-called torture might happen and so on, human rights. So that's the tradition. And so Ja'far went to Abyssinia, presented to the Negus, the king, and he said this. It's only 16-point font writing, it looks big, it's not even a page long, it's half a page in normal writing. Let me read this to you, because this is how he understood Islam, and he presented his case. So if we just say this to you, if there are non-Muslims who say, oh, what's Islam all about? Look what Ja'far said to the Christian king when he didn't know a thing about Islam and Prophet Muhammad, peace be on him. He said, O king, we were ignorant people, and we lived like wild animals. The strong amongst us lived by preying upon the weak. We obeyed no law, and we acknowledged no authority except that of brute force. We worshipped idols made of stone or wood, and we knew nothing about human dignity. And then God, in His mercy, sent to us His messenger, who was himself one of us. We knew about His truthfulness and His integrity. His character was exemplary, and he was the most well-born of the Arabs. He invited us toward the worship of one God, and he forbade us to worship idols. He exhorted, encouraged us to tell the truth, to honor our promises, to protect the weak, the poor, the humble, the widows, the orphans, and to abstain from bloodshed. He ordered us to show respect to women and never to slander them. We obeyed him and followed his teachings, and most of the people in our country are still polytheists, and they resented our conversion to his faith, to this new faith we call Islam. They began to persecute us, and it was in order to escape that we came to you and found sanctuary, O King. Other conversations then happened and so forth, but they were granted refuge and respect. But these things that he mentioned with confidence and with such clarity, Ja'far was not lying or trying to appease the king or trying to deceive him into thinking that we're really monsters who pretend to be sheep. Of course not. Now let's measure ourselves as Muslims in Britain. How much of that do we uphold or represent? So when we said self-criticism, are we known that in Harrow, for example, that the local community know us for kindness? And if you want to be kind and you don't know how to be, well, go to Charity Commission, UK Charity Commission website. Dr. Hani al-Banna was a student of it. He started with 6 pence in his pocket when he started. We were colleagues, same kind of age group. Now he's dealing with 100 million, same time. 100 million pounds for charity orphans. What about Britain? I mean, you can spend 100 billion in the world and still not satisfy the needs. But we have to do something here. So are we known for kindness? So we teamed up because we want to, not to show off, not to get good press, not because it's a politically expedient thing to do. God loves it. It's the right thing to do. And this is my preaching kind of bit coming out. Allah loves it. I have to say this to Muslims. We must learn to love those things in their own rights because they are truly lovable. Now what I have here now is, having said the 4 things, I want to just read to you. Nothing that I mention now will be repulsive or something that could be rejected by the heart of any normal human being, let alone those who subscribe to what we call a faith like Christianity or Judaism. I don't know much about Hinduism. Perhaps they will not feel anything to take exception to that as well. Buddhists certainly wouldn't. I know that. My best friends are Buddhists. They were the first ones to support us when our mosque project was burned down. and a Christian evangelist, Methodist rather. She came and prayed at that site that we visited and gave us money as a Christian. So this is the point, the 10 commandments and the 7 cardinal sins. Common. So we have so much in common. Why aren't we then yet known? Whether this country is secular or not, whether the majority of the people have stopped going to churches or not. We are Muslims. People know us for certain things. Don't talk about terrorism all the time. Why aren't we known for certain things which we can do? So I'm going to finish up very quickly now, inshallah, because time is moving on, and I do not make it too technical. 2 more stories. Okay. This is a lady who was captured at the battlefield. Once some conflict happened, and she's captured, and Prophet is there, Muhammad, peace be on him, and the companions are standing around, the disciples of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. This is Ibn Kathir. And the lady says, "Oh Muhammad," well, she didn't say Rasulullah alayhi salam, but we say sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Ya Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, won't you release me and spare me from the malicious gloating of the Arab tribes? She's feeling uncomfortable, being stared at or ogled at. She's beautiful. I am the daughter of the leader of the people. My father was a guardian of the sacred objects. What does that mean? Father was a pagan priest looking after handmade idols. You can't get a more of a polytheist than that. But, and she mentions 7 things. He relieved the distressed, fed the hungry, clothed the naked, gave generous hospitality, provided the best food, spread peace abroad, and never refused the request of the needy. If we now do a little quiz and ask the Muslims to say, give me a hadith for each one of these 7 categories, you'll be able to do it. Never turn a beggar away, even if it's the cooked food, for example. Charity figures so much in Islam, but these 7 things. A believer is he who treats his guest well. Hospitality. All of these things are taught by the Prophet. So what do you expect the response would be? My father, he relieved the distressed. He fed the hungry, clothed the naked, gave generous hospitality, provided the best food, spread peace abroad, and never refused the request of the needy. I am the daughter of Hatim at-Ta'i. Pagan. Not even a Jew or a Christian. Pagan. And Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, lady, all that you described describes the true believer. Had your father been alive, we would have been merciful to him. Release her, because her father used to do good deeds, and God Almighty loves good deeds. So yeah, I can talk about 5 pillars, 5 prayers, and there are prayers. I mean, I know one imam, and I was shocked, and I'm still seething inside. I'm going to bring it up today in Loughborough Islamic Society talk, unfortunately. I won't identify him. He's an imam. He's on benefits. His recitation is wonderful. And he's cheating the system. No. Can I prove it? No, he takes cash. £800 a month he's getting. And he's getting other months, mosque funds. It's disappearing somewhere. And he's in a council flat and is renting it out. Imam. Do you want to be an imam like that, or do you just want to be an ordinary Muslim? And how far is that? Because you will go to his prayers, listen to it and say, oh, it's divine, such beautiful recitation. I wish one day I could read. Rather be like that Muslim who's humble, struggles and gets it wrong, and because of stuttering, in having it difficult, finding it difficult to pronounce God's word, but sincere, gets double reward. Allah loves that more than all this showing off and faffing around trying to prove. So the companion said, Ya Rasulullah, Messenger of Allah, does God really love good deeds? And the Prophet said, peace be on him, by him in whose hand is my life, no one will enter heaven except by good deeds. That's why you plant the seed, even when all hope is lost, because it's not just about Renewing hope, giving hope is the right thing to do. What do? Squash the seat under your feet, crush it up and throw it away? Or what sort of gesture would you do? Flick it away? What is right for us to do? Do the best under the circumstances. In the end, we are believers. You might be mistaken. It is not the day of judgment. It's just an earthquake. Just a volcano erupting. It's perfectly fine 20 miles away. Plant that seed. And the next one, the last story, inshallah, for tonight. So there are these 10 commandments. I don't aim to go through that. They're in the scriptures, in the Old Testament. They are also sometimes hung in old churches as well, on the wall. But you have the 7 cardinal sins. We are moral beings. We are looking for guidance. We want to live a life of fulfillment, meaningful fulfillment, so that it does not harm anyone. There are 5 main aims of the Islamic law. 5 main aims you must know. One is, of course, preservation of life. Which order you put it depends on how you want to contextualize it. What is more important in society? What's a thriving issue or a going concern? But all 5, in any order if you like, 6, 7, there are some who say 6. The first one is preservation of life, sanctity of life, human dignity, life. Second thing is, of course, we would say as religious people, protection of the faith. You don't have to. Because the third one is intellect. You can reverse the 2 around. Because without intellect, without this gift that God has given us of the intellect, how do you actually understand and follow any religion? Which one do you protect first, religion or intellect? Allow people to become stupid and then impose religion, or you allow people to remain clever and learn to learn, and then tell them about religion? So life, religion, intellect, property, progeny. You can turn them around as well. Progeny, children, future generations. These 5 are sacred. Anything which goes against the preservation and enhancement of these 5 goals is causing corruption in Islam. That is causing corruption. And that's in the field of jurisprudence. I also have with me the universal principles of fiqh or jurisprudence. We won't go through that. Last story. Do you remember, brothers and sisters, what happened to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he came back after the first experience of revelation? He was disturbed, wasn't he? He was troubled. He was, I was preparing for this and now I have, at last. Got it. Eureka. No. It shows he was genuine. He was sitting there, meditating, reflecting, thinking. He never associated partners with God. Never took part in anything, any polluted type of worship. And one day, the story goes, we believe it, the story goes that Angel Gabriel came, Archangel Gabriel, peace be on him, and the first revelation was given to him. And he experienced that, and he came running, trembling, and he was shaking in fear and trouble. And he said to his wife Khadija radiallahu anha, what happened to me? What is happening to me and what happened to me? What was it just now that came to me? Am I going mad? Is this something I should be, is it a premonition of something bad to happen? Am I losing my mind? What happened? What is wrong with me? So I'm afraid, he said, I'm afraid for myself. I'm scared. And who is he saying this to? The one who was supposed to be the most valiant warrior. He was. Because he single-handedly went off into the darkness. Remember the incident in Medina? When it was dark, pitch dark, and there was noise in the outgrowth somewhere. And all the disciples were like, scared. And he said, okay, I'll go and check it out. He flung his shoulder on his back, bareback on horse riding, went off, and came back, reassured them. Said, there's nothing there. Don't be scared. He was brave. But he's saying to whom? To a woman, to his wife. A lot to be learned from that. And said, I am scared. And she said, no, I swear by Allah. Cheer up. Be of good cheer. This is the last story. I swear by God, God will never disgrace you or cause you harm or sadness. She said, you maintain family ties. This is your character. You've done so until now. You maintain family ties. You are truthful. truthful. وَتَحْمِلُ الْكَلَّ, you provide for those in need. That will alleviate their burden of suffering and so forth. وَتَكْسِبُ الْمَعْدُومَ, you provide for the poor. That's your character, that's what you're known for. That's your personality. That's in your nature. You give generously to them. وَتَقْرِي الدَّيْفِ, you are hospitable to guests. You honor them. تُعِينُ عَلَى نَوَائِبِ الْحَقِّ, and you help them when tragedy strikes them, some calamity afflicts them. When distress is there, you try to help the people. All the people at this time were non-Muslims, pagans, idol worshippers. Some were burying their daughters alive. Some were dancing naked around the Kaaba. Some were drunk in the streets and ripping apart the bellies of camels and goats, just for fun. And he was living among those people. At the same time, they had large sort of artistic abilities as well, writing poetry and stuff. It's a bit of a discussion about how could we have Beethoven's symphony and stuff like that in Germany, and yet look at how they had treated large sections of humanity, particularly the Jews, in gas chambers and stuff. How can it be like this? People excel in classical music and appreciation of art and culture, at the same time they become so inhuman. But that's where he was, and this was his characteristic. You help them when tragedy strikes them. The point is, this was a beautiful character. And the Prophet Muhammad, peace be on him, was commissioned with messengership after he was known to be like that in social action. All of this. Not one of them is about, and you pray a lot, and you meditate and glorify God a lot, and you're sitting there reading the Quran. No, of course not. The Quran wasn't even revealed at that time. Only the first verse came. So that's the point. Islam is about being beautiful. There's a lot to be said about the qualities and characteristics of a believer. One can get technical. Part of the problem we have today amongst ourselves is we get very dry and technical about and legalistic and literal. And we forget that in the end, when Allah says, through the Prophet Muhammad, peace be on him, that he does not look at your faces and your bodies, but he looks at your heart, and the actions from your hearts is very much about what is it inside. How do we feel? Are we walking around with hate and grudge and envy and jealousy and lust, or are we truly trying to become better? Why? Because that's what God loves, and a purified heart enter paradise. We can't do that without serving humanity. We can never be a religious person of any type without serving humanity. May Allah guide me and guide you. Thank you very much for this opportunity. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive all of us, past, present and future. May the angels surround us. We believe when we gather together like this, the angels surround us and they pray to God so that our bad deeds become substituted into good deeds. That's for the mercy of God. We ask Allah to unite us all in the best of paradise. Al-Jannah al-Firdaus. Ameen. Subhanakallahumma. Alhamdulillah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. I stopped too early. 20 minutes is the maximum time you should speak. I was talking for more than half an hour, I'm sure.
Thank you very much, Muntazir. We're going to start with the question and answer session.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead then.
Basically, I'm from Jordan, so obviously 90% of my friends are Muslim, while I'm Christian. And we were sitting one day in my room with my 4 other friends, and they were like, oh, imagine if we're chilling after life in heaven. And then one of them looked at me and she was like, oh, you won't be with us. So I just want to ask if it's true. Is it that only Muslims get to go to heaven?
There is. The technical short answer would be that if you look at the Quranic statements, as it is stated, without any explanation, reasoning and so forth, the blunt answer would be only Muslims go to heaven. The difficulty is, we are not judges, and although that's a response we have to make from the technical description of the statements, the scripture, Muslims go to heaven. Allah, God is the judge. And when God judges, He judges with perfect justice. And His mercy prevails over His anger, which we find it difficult to do ourselves. Now, there are some verses which talk about how there are Jews and Christians and other people, Sabians, Magians and so on. There's controversy about who exactly are they. At least some people say, well, if they have people with those characteristics, there are other people who had tried to follow the natural faith of worshipping God and believing in accountability and so on, that they are going to be forgiven. Certainly Jews and Christians are mentioned in the Quran by name who had followed the respective prophets, whether Jesus Christ or Moses and in between whoever came. So some scholars, Muslim scholars, will say it only applies to those Jews and Christians who came before Muhammad, peace be on him. After Muhammad, peace be on him, it doesn't apply anymore. But that's not absolute or categorical, and there's no consensus on that. It's surprisingly like Muslims believe there's consensus, but there isn't, because like the controversy about who was the first sacrifice of Abraham, peace be on him. Was it Isaac or was it Ishmael? The majority of the Muslims think and very confidently argue the point, it was Ismail alayhi salam. But you'll go to classical sources, you will find Muslim exegesis, Mufassirun, actually saying it was Ishaq, Isaac, peace be on him. So it's like that. When we don't have consensus and something which is categorically assertable, we say God judges. But what does it mean to be the second level of difficulty? What does it mean to be a Muslim? Who do you think has better opportunity or chance? The one who knows about Islam and then takes it for granted and behaves in a God-forsaken way, or the one who has a natural goodness, instinctive goodness that God has put in the heart of every human being and remain undefiled, unpolluted. Because hadith, we must know these terms, yeah? Hadith, of course, hadith, traditions of the Prophet teach us that on the Day of Judgment, certain people will appeal to God and say, how can I go to hell, or why would you send me there? Okay, three categories of people. One would be one who did not understand Islam. Now, would you and I today blame people for not understanding Islam when it seems the majority of us Muslims don't understand Islam? So it's not an automatic ticket to paradise. But, strictly speaking, if you don't believe in the oneness of God, and the key to paradise we say is, La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah. But then there is sins and forgiveness. One thing I must say though in the end, whether that's not my concern in the end, because I should be concerned more about myself. Am I saved? More than worrying about. And I know to be saved, there are certain conditions to be fulfilled. And the primary conditions are the conditions attached to that kalima we say, La ilaha illallah. There's only one deity worthy of worship. That is the key to paradise. And one of those conditions is sincerity. Al-ikhlas. One of them is as-sidq, truthfulness. One of them is al-inqiyad, following, for example, compliance with the rules, regulations. Where is that compliance in my life with the prophetic teaching? Where is the sincerity in my life or truthfulness? And that, in that context, I tried to mention that we are sending 150 million pounds abroad. We can send 150 billion pounds abroad. It's a noble task, rewarding. Money goes a lot further other countries. And they don't have a welfare state like we do, even though it's being whittled down. And quite rightfully so as well, I believe. But the point is, zakat collected in Britain, why is this spent in Britain? Because when the introduction you said Muslim asylum seekers, refugees, that's not strictly true. We support people, not Muslims only. If only we would get 1% of that, £1 million in zakat, we can hardly collect £50,000 in 2 years. Go to our Just Giving site on page. And all our zakat is spent in Britain on the 8 deserving categories mentioned in the Quran. And sometimes those zakat recipients are not Muslims. I'll give you one example. Sorry, you asked me the question, I take the opportunity to take advantage. One example is this Czech lady who is not a Muslim. She's an Eastern Orthodox Christian, and her Serbian boyfriend. Now, for your information, I have been involved in jihadi stuff. So, Mujahid read the Quran, mashallah. One of my comrades was actually from Malaysia with an M16 in Afghanistan. I have fought in Afghanistan, I've taken part in combat, I have fought in Kashmir, I've taken part in all sorts of jihadi stuff in Burma, arms shipment from Malaysia to the airdrop into Bangladesh, all sorts of dodgy, funny things. Pakistan, Bosnia, Chechnya. Bosnia, we fought and sent convoys and sent equipment and raised funds and stuff. We did all this. to fight against mainly homeless Serbs. So this Czech lady with a Serbian boyfriend, Jimas, for the money that you give, however little you give, it's a real case. They are there, in need, in poverty. The only thing stopping that person from having about to have a baby is to be able to get a job. So what did we do? We gave money to this Serbian boyfriend to learn English. So you get the certificate and competence in English from a college. Provided you pass that, if you pass that, we will give you money to go and do electrician's course. Because you haven't got an English certificate. If you pass that, you only owe half the money back to us. If you don't, then you have to owe it all back to us. The English part is free. It's about £10,000. So you can take £10 to Bangladesh and do a lot. But then in Britain, we need zakat for not just Serbians and Czech. I know Kurdish brothers dying of starvation in Ipswich. 60% of the asylum seekers happen to be Muslims. Where are the Muslims supporting them? All the money going abroad. So that's what I mean. So I mean, that's what we are trying to do, and we are not getting very much, not making very much headway. And lastly, this church, we bought St. Michael's Church, 12 years derelict, lying around. Like Omar, because I had a meeting last week with the Princess Regeneration Trust. And the man goes to me, and he looked Jewish to me, he had a black kind of bowler hat type and a beard, and so maybe I'm stereotyping him, but I wouldn't dare ask him, are you Jewish? But anyway, I said to him, this St. Michael's Church will not become a mosque. So he goes, why? Is it because of public complaint? I said, no, because of us. It used to be a church. How can I convert this church into a mosque? It's really not the way to go. He said, well, there are many churches in England that we have finance and so on to become into places. I said, no, but we have a different view. The church hall we might convert into something else for religious worship and whatnot. The main church will not be a mosque. Not because people are complaining, we won't do it. It's not an Islamic thing to do as far as we're concerned.
Well, we've got plenty of time for questions. Yeah, so please think about any questions that you'd like to ask, particularly related to the subject, and we'll keep going until dinner later on. Next question.
In your talk, you alluded to something about something about self-criticism, that Muslims are sometimes reluctant to self-criticize, and in general, there is like a perceived sort of insecurity amongst certain sections of Muslims, and like maybe oversensitivity sometimes, like when it comes to talking about their faith. Why do you think this is? Do you think it's?
I don't know. So it's a very good question. I don't really. The first response, gut reaction, we don't know. And when we say self-criticism, we actually include ourselves into it, isn't it? I'm part of the Muslim Ummah, Muslims in Britain and so forth. It all reflects back on me and my people and so on, in the narrow sense of Muslims, yeah, my people. I don't know why it is like that, because I think it's a lot to do with lack of education, because Muslims, it's again another criticism, I hope you're not offended or not, because Islam actually prohibits us of insulting Muslims. Because Muslims are honorable people, really they are. Because in their heart there's the oneness of God, they're bowing, prostrating to God, even they have bad character here and there. So in a sense, there's a sanctity about being a Muslim which is special, and we mustn't erode into that by too much haphazard, callous criticism. So it feels awkward. Maybe that's one of the reasons why we don't always defensive about Muslims and never owning up to real problems. But that's a problem in itself. I think perhaps because we're not as educated as we think we are. The entire Arab world put together, the Muslim countries I'm told, and you can always question statistics, can't you, with a bit of pinch of salt. But it can't be that wrong. There are 500 odd universities in the entire Muslim world. There are more than 5,000 in the USA, more than 3,000 in India alone. The entire literary output, books, magazines, what have you, publications, from the entire Muslim world, we're not just talking about Egypt or Pakistan, all of them, Saudi Arabia, Jordan included, Muslim kind of thing. Doesn't even match the amount of books published in Spain. It's one country. $500 billion worth of produce, output in the entire Muslim world, including Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, all the Gulf oil-rich countries, for products produced, 500 billion. It's less than Britain, one country. It's almost equal to Spain. Spain, of all countries. With Greece next. So you look at our situation for that. Somebody once said that education is about being able to consider opinions without getting angry and without losing self-confidence. And we have a common trait amongst ourselves. We get angry too quickly. Any criticism is a challenge and we become defensive. Why? I don't know. And secondly, we lose self-confidence. It's a sign of not having confidence. Can't be challenged.
Sheikh, I'd like to ask you to elaborate on a couple of things that are relevant to the basics of Islam. In Islam, what is the criterion of judgment?
Judgment? Their judgment?
No. Of how people are judged. Like we begin the hadith in
Okay, that's not okay. But Abdullah knows the answer, obviously.
This is trying to be
I don't have adversaries, I'm getting technical. No, thank you for reminding us. It's about intention. One must intend well. The reason I hesitate a little bit is because I've heard that mentioned so many times, and I myself have offered it. Well, the intention is good. What else could we have done? Had to do something. We intended well. Allah, God Almighty, and His Prophet Muhammad, peace be on him, has obligated on the Muslim, at least, because we follow the teachings, we try to, or we claim we do, learning. And first of all, learning about character, the good qualities of a human being. But learning is an obligation from the cradle to the grave. And although there are traditions which are questionable about their repute or authenticity, like seek knowledge, even if it be unto China, and some people say, oh, that's fabricated. But in spirit it is correct. So although in Islam, intention is what is looked at, and the intention determines the reward or the punishment, if you like, of the person's action, we have still an obligation to learn and do the right thing. And that's why sometimes religious people, they begin to talk like that, but it is the right thing to do. And in Islam we have rules about that, that one must never do any action which he can think ahead, calculate, not a crystal ball gazing, but given human intelligence, past things what happened, experience, trends forecasted in an intelligent way, never do anything which brings harm. It's not allowed in Islam, it's prohibited. So it's not good, so well, what else can we do? I intended well. But having done the research, having thought about it and then said, okay, I think the best way, or we think the best thing to do is this, and then do it, and the result is all messed up, wrong, or causes injustice, then we can say, well, we meant well, and God knows we meant well. So nobody is going to be punished by God, as it were. But we have to be responsible about it. So in Islam, intention comes first. Everything on the basis of intention. Okay? But it does not at all give us the excuse to ignore the responsibility of learning and doing the right thing. That's why Tony Blair, towards the latter part of the Iraq war, is going on about the right thing and so on, to become a Catholic. It's a religious thing.
The next topic that maybe you could elaborate on further is Tawheed. I know you have one God.
Guys, what's the question, please? First?
We got a question?
Yeah.
Go on.
I've actually got three, but that's the one. It's too much.
We'll start off with one. We'll see how it goes.
If I just ask the three questions, then you can maybe jot them down and just answer them again.
Ask me one at a time without forgetting.
One at a time, yeah.
Please.
Is this on?
That's all.
Okay, the first question is, sorry, Assalamu alaikum.
Mine.
Sorry, I had to drop. The first question is to do with, you mentioned that you're a British Muslim. I just want you to kind of clarify that.
Well, if you want to
If I just carry on with the question. You're saying that you're a British Muslim because you have a British passport, you live here, because you have a UK driving license, as in geography, or do you mean like you accept British values, so freedom, democracy, human rights, freedom of speech, expression? Do you accept British values, or is it because you're located in this country?
There are other British values, but those ones certainly I do, yes. Now the controversy will be, what do you mean by democracy? Does that mean you are now rejecting God's sovereignty in terms of how he makes the laws and legalizes or prohibits and so on. So those are discussions to be had. When you say secular society, what do you mean by secular? That means you shouldn't think about Islam and Islamic principles and values when doing actions. Of course I don't. So it's just like an arrangement you make or a setup you have in order for you to function, for different people to function in a setup, is in that sense. Many of the intellectuals, most of the qualified intellectual people in the past had a great problem with democracy as it became established in Britain. Many of the philosophers and the people of repute. And particularly from the church, of course, because it's like taking sovereignty away and so on. And it's by ruling by the mob and stuff. We understand all that. Then you look at the options available, and you look at what Muslims have attained and can attain. You look at the model in Medina, and what the Prophet had done in his capacity of being a messenger. And then you talk about the nation states and the Islamic model of the early times before the nation states came about. And then you talk about, okay, given all that, is there a way to have a representative type of government where people's wishes and problems are taken on board, discussed, it's transparent, it's open, the judiciary is free, and nobody's corrupt in the sense that things are so open, really. Then you begin to think maybe there is a way of accommodating understanding, because in the end, the Quran does not prescribe and does not tell us how to actually run the government. So the first responsibility, yes I do, I accept democracy. Freedom of speech, certainly. So would a Christian be allowed to preach in a Muslim country? I would say yes. They will say, what about Ali said this or they allowed him? So we'll discuss that. And we'll look at the issues in terms of faith.
But wouldn't that allow blasphemy?
No.
That's freedom of speech?
No. Not to my understanding. And if it did, and certainly you can prove it wrong, that I'm mistaken, I'm wrong, so I'll change my mind. The point is, being British is part of being part of your country. It's not about this democracy, because you can be a communist in this country or a socialist and not accept these things, isn't it? You can be a Muslim and not accept any of these things or none of those things. You can still be British. This is your country. It's not about those things only. It's about, this is my country, this is where I grew up, this is where I went to school, I feel at one, this is my football team, this is my flag, or, it's just natural. It's my history, it's natural. So being a Muslim is my philosophical identity. I'm a Muslim. But if you want to talk about it in terms of citizenship and in terms of a social identity, well, I'm British, but I'm Muslim.
The reason why I asked the question was because, previously Tony Blair and recently David Cameron, they both kind of specified exactly what they mean by accepting the fact that we're British. And it was actually, they mentioned the values of Britain, and that these are the values that need to be accepted and adopted by each of the citizens. So it's not just about living here and trying to mingle in with people here, but it's actually about adopting these values, core values. So that is his definition of being British. So I want to know whether yours is.
Well, I'm not entirely okay with what Cameron and Blair have said in terms of those things. I know some of the things they've said. But at the end of the day, look, it's like this, isn't it? If we come to a resolution and understanding that they actually so severely conflict with us being a Muslim in this country, then we would have to make an alternative arrangement. Maybe we'll establish that Khilafah somewhere else, or maybe some country will open the door where it's more amenable to our Islam, or maybe we'll have a special dispensation given in Britain for those particular things. So I don't know, we haven't thought it through and discussed, but naturally I just feel British, I have no problem with the things you mentioned.
Before you go on, does anyone else have another question? Yes, Brian.
Hello, good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
Do appreciate being able to be here. And thank you very much for your speech. It's been very enlightening and given a different aspect of Islam. And so thank you very much indeed. You were speaking about values. And I think, as I said, I'm a practicing Christian, and one lovely picture that we get in the scripture, the Bible, about values gentleness and self-control. So it's a very interesting picture because it says the fruit is singular. We have the 9 aspects of the fruit. And fruit it's attractive, isn't it, to look at. It's also fragrant and it's reproductive. And I think those are beautiful characteristics with art. And fruit, it grows spontaneously. That's an interesting aspect of it, isn't it? It's not produced by effort. If the tree is healthy, the soil is healthy, climatic conditions are good, the fruit will grow.
I don't think any Muslim, thank you for that, I don't think any Muslim will take exception to any of those qualities you mentioned. And the tree analogy is also found in the Quran in chapter 14.
Right.
About,
It's in contrast. The verse is in Galatians, the letter that Paul wrote to the Christians in Galatia, which is Turkey these days. And there, before the fruit of the Spirit, it lists the works, plural, of the flesh, and the jealousy, envy, and lust, and so on. And so it's wonderful that we can produce this beautiful fruit rather than the works of the sinful nature.
Thank you. Thank you for your participation. Next question. Was there a question on this side? Did you have a question?
Yeah, could you briefly explain the 5 pillars of Islam?
5 pillars of Islam. The first is the testimony to the central tenet or creed of Islam, which is to bear witness that there is none worthy of worship except God alone. And we refer to him as Allah. And that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, may the peace and blessings of God be upon him, that he is God's slave and messenger. So to have conviction about these 2 tenets in the heart and then articulate that. And then the rest is all commentary regarding that central creed. How do we actually live a life of there is only one deity worthy of worship, no partners, no associates, and that Muhammad is his messenger, peace be on him. So that's what the first pillar is, to accept it first, and then grow in conviction, and the duty out of that is to express that in life. And that's why sometimes people ask, and they have valid points, and I don't know the answer to everything obviously, do you actually accept democracy? Or freedom of speech, you could end up in blasphemy. It's a real concern, it's not just for the sake of argument. Because of La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah. Okay, that's the first. The second is, after that would come prayers. And as all Muslims would know, it's about praying 5 times a day, at certain times, in certain ways, a certain number of units. You stand, you bow, you prostrate twice, and you stand up. That's 1 unit. So there are a certain number of units we do at 5 intervals, 5 kind of like phases of times. So we have to pray 5 times a day. All adult Muslims have to, male or female. And that regulates not just what happens around that, but also we say it reminds us of God, keeps us fresh in the idea and remembrance of God. And the very act of going through the motion itself with faith and sincerity cleanses us, because of the bad things we might do in between, for example, the minor things. So it is a devotional act, and we are required to do it, and by doing it we gain such a lot that we can't put a value to it really. It's something fundamental we have to do. Even when we are on bed, we'll still pray, perhaps lying down. And we are taught that's the first thing we're going to be asked about on the Day of Judgment. When God takes into account everything we have said, done, and so forth, that's the first thing He will ask us about. So as an intelligent, capable Muslim, mukallaf, if we don't perform it, then we're going to have a hard time, we are told. Everything else will become of secondary importance. So that's how prayers are so important. The third pillar is about, well, depends how you take it, but we'll say fasting, not the zakat, fasting. Because that happens once a month. It sounds like a long, for a whole month, it sounds like a long time. But for a whole month, once a year, we have to fast. That means we refrain from food and drink, obviously, but also equally importantly, we try to refrain from bad manners. like lying and picking a fight or an argument or foul language. So it's a month of training, disciplining, sharing, learning to do with less and feeling, empathizing with the needs of others. But it's about developing the character as well. And a lot of things happen during that month, extra prayers to more reading the Quran and doing charity works. Because all of those things are encouraged by saying that if you do them, what you do ordinarily do at other times, you get more reward, double reward from God. God likes it better kind of thing. But it's really for our own good. So we fast. The point is it sounds long, it looks hard, but after the first 2-3 days it becomes easy, you get used to it. In fact, after the end of the fasting month, it becomes hard to eat as much as you would like to eat or used to eat before. So you start gradually get back into the gluttony mode again. But that's your third pillar. The fourth one is zakat, which I slightly emotionally mentioned about what's happening. There needs to be a focus. 2.5% of our annual savings above a certain amount. It's not a lot. It almost makes most of us liable to pay that 2.5%. So 2.5% of our saving for a whole year. It's a whole year, that minimum amount or more stayed somewhere untouched, unused. The amount never dropped below that level, as it were. So 2.5% of that we have to give to certain categories of deserving people. Normally the state or the caliph or the king, they would manage it. You give it to them, it goes to central treasury, and then give it out and so forth. If not the global caliphate, you have the system of rulers in different places and so on. But the institution has to carry on, whether you're a dictatorship, an individual, or someone. So in this country now, what we do is we have various organizations, they collect on your behalf, and then in a good way dispose of that money. And that's what we're referring to. That 100 million perhaps by Islamic Relief, this Muslim Aid, all sorts of things. 150, 160 million pounds get collected. The simple rule about zakat is it should be spent where it is collected from. And that simple rule is very much neglected, unfortunately, when there is need in the UK. And that's all I'm saying. Not saying that all the money should stay here or go there. 20% can stay here, 80% can go abroad. But we have to do that. So when police or the state sometimes get funny about charity organizations, because of where are they spending it, where are they taking it, to whom are they giving, the borders of Pakistan or what have you, these are valid concerns again. And they shut down charities as well for having dodgy links or something. It affects all the Muslims. How are we meant to do this work? What GMAS does in Britain only, and we have not sufficient funds, so you can give me 10 million pounds, we can spend it all. And our website will tell you what it's about. But that's the fourth pillar, zakat. I brought some booklets with me on zakat. So, testimony of the oneness of God and Prophet Muhammad being his messenger, peace be on him. Praying 5 times a day. Fasting in the month of Ramadan. Our calendar is lunar based. And then zakat, the fifth, the charity, animal charity. And the fifth is going to pilgrimage. Once in a lifetime, really. If you want to go more regularly, you can, but it's conditional on 2 things basically. You can afford it, and you're able to get there. So if you have enough money, it costs about £3,000–4,000 for a low-scale package now to go from Britain for a single person. It's quite expensive, and especially people from other countries, they save up for the whole life. And to go at an old age, or other people talk together and then send somebody from the village or grandfather and things like that. But £3,000 to £5,000 you can easily spend per person going from Britain for Hajj for at least 2 weeks. No, it's about up to 3 weeks, if not longer. What's a lifetime? Obligation on male and female, if you can afford it. If the road is clear, that could mean with the political problems, you can't get airline ticket. Well, you couldn't go. That's when the intention will come in. Because you intended to go, you still get the reward, but then go again next time you're able to. These are the 5 pillars.
So what's the pilgrimage for? What's the pilgrimage for? What do you do?
Well, pilgrimages, again, there are, Nabil Ahmed, he mentioned about Malcolm X, and it's a universal thing. So the first thing about Malcolm X is when he went there, of course, he discovered the unity and the brotherhood and the commonality of the creed and how we share in a common kind of equality before God. We are all worshipping together. So it's about tightening and affirming not only our closeness to God, it's about closeness to each other as Muslims who will believe in the same God and the same kind of hopes of paradise, aversion of hellfire. And secondly, it's about self-purification. It connects us back in time to Abraham, peace be on him. We reenact it's almost like a period play, but it's like a drama thing or nativity kind of thing that we do at Christmas. But it's for the Muslims. And it's actually retracing the footsteps of Abraham and Ishmael and Hagar and all those kind of things. Some people say it's mythological, some will say it's maybe made up, so on. But the point is, these traditions have stayed there since time immemorial and then adopted and purified by Prophet Muhammad, peace be on him. So of course you can always say this was a pagan practice, but it was a vestige of what they had remembered once upon a time this person called Abraham had come and done. And that's what the Hajj is about, to reconnect with Allah, reconnect with the Muslim nation, and reconnect with the prophets of bygone days, especially Abraham. Peace be on him. Brothers and sisters, you want to add something and do so. Sure.
Question over.
So, during your talk you said basically, sometimes when you carry out actions, you have to basically ask your partner, based upon your heart, so what does your heart tell you? That's what you said during your talk. Was it that opposite to what Islam says? Because Islam, as we as Muslims see, it's a complete system. And it's a perfect system which has its own rules and regulations which tell you how to carry out and execute every single action in your life. And it also, Allah says in the Quran, I've given you a book which gives you solutions to all life's problems. And it gives you a framework of halal and haram. So if you were to carry out an action, you refer all your actions back to the Quran and the Sunnah.
Yes, it does.
Sunnah being obviously the tradition of the Prophet ﷺ.
Yes.
And we also said that generic Quran, there's no governance in there. But the governance comes through the hadith. And it also comes through the life of the Prophet ﷺ. So if you analyse his life, and obviously the seerah, which is obviously his biography, you can determine and it tells you how the Prophet ﷺ laid down a system which brought mercy for the entire mankind.
So you and I can sit down and interpret the life of the Prophet, peace be on him, in relation to the Quran, and then create a system out of that.
But also the hadith.
So people, you and I have to do that, isn't it? We bring our interpretation, our understanding, and then we have to cope with our differences of opinion about how some things fit or does not fit into our context.
Absolutely, but it's the strongest opinion. All Muslims agree.
Well, that is the point. The point is, the Quran has the solution to everything. That becomes a slogan if we don't offer the solutions. So when you and I sit down, or Muslim scholars and people of gifted intellect, whoever they are, people who matter, they sit down and they look at the revelation, and they must look at the Quran and the Sunnah, nothing without reference to that, and then interpret that in our context to see what are the solutions. Then we are beginning to do what we say the Quran is a solution to. And in that discovery of solutions, some people will differ, as they've always done. And then there is also a whole set of instructions and rules, if you like, on how to differ. Alhamdulillah, so I'm not disagreeing with you. But a lot of work needs to be done. I think we're still at a stage of a more superficial level. We know this solution to everything. We know it's this and we know it's that. But it remains as rubrics and surface thing. Let's develop them, inshallah, a bit more in our context. That's why the rules of jurisprudence are there. So they change with time, but the principles don't, and the halal, haram, they don't change ever. What's followed is followed, they don't change. So we have to do that work, and scholars have differed throughout. That's a large topic. We can one day maybe do a talk about the differences amongst our scholars in the past about some even fundamental matters. I agree with you.
If you look at the Quran and Sunnah, the Islam already been done in certain matters. Until a new reality arises, then you can't obviously redo the Ishtihad.
That's good. Alhamdulillah. Then I'd like to, maybe you can send me an email, mail@gmas.org. Send me an email about where this Ishtihad has been done that fits in our time and place in this century, in Britain or Palestine.
Absolutely.
Yeah, inshallah. Send me.
Take the next question. Yes.
I'm sure you've heard the recent news about how the US soldiers burnt the Quran in Afghanistan. I was just wondering, how far do you agree with the reaction of the Afghans to this, and what does the Quran and Hadith say in terms of defending the religion and retaliation in such cases?
the difference between what we want to accept that the Americans have done and when Muslims dispose of the Quran is one of respect. Because the Quran, one of the ways of disposing it is to burn it. If not bury it or throw in a river or a well and so on. One of them is to burn it. In fact, it was done before all the other fragments and everything, different reading were kind of like set aside and said, this is going to be the one we're going to follow from now on. They collected all these other variant readings, if you like, and they burnt it. And the companions all agreed to do so. There was consensus about it. So burning the Quran is not the problem. The problem is, did you burn it out of spite and malice and disrespect, or did you burn it to nicely and properly dispose of it? Unfortunately now it seems that people in Afghanistan and elsewhere want to accept it was done maliciously, despite the apologies given, whether by Obama or by the military ruler and so forth. And although to some degree we can say, well, they have said they haven't done it on purpose, it was a mistake, wanting to accept it. On the other hand, you can also say, well, given that what has gone on so far, of betrayals and the killings and so on, whatever the intent, we can't help but think it was done maliciously, because there have been American troops and generals in Saudi and in Afghanistan saying openly things which are very questionable, as if they are there for a vengeance against Islam and Muslims. But that's individual. Now, can we and should we apply that to all the Americans and say they're always lying? So my position is, I just don't agree. I think it's tragic it's happening like that. And they have apologized, and they said so. The YouTube clips are out there, telling the truth, and call it a day, because in the end, protesting and dying like that is not achieving anything. And burning the Quran wasn't the problem. Now, you can never prove that they are all hell-bent, as it were, to do it out of malice. And they're saying, sorry, it shouldn't have happened, it won't happen again. And we can keep on saying, no, you don't mean it, but that's not the way to go. Is it worth 7, 8 of us dying?
Next question takers? Yes?
I just wanted to know what is your perspective on reading the Torah, the Zabur, is it, and the Injil? Just because I've met some Muslims who really embrace those as Islamic holy books, and others who seem to steer away from them and view them with suspicion.
The Torah is Torah, and the Zabur is the Psalms of David. Peace be on him. There is a general understanding amongst Muslims from actually derived from the Quran, that parts of the scripture have been lost. Don't have to blame anyone, it's just got lost over time, and parts of the scripture have been changed deliberately. So it becomes contentious and argumentation and so forth. But we fall back upon the prophetic narration, which say that when the Jews and Christians, when the scriptures quote or you bring traditions from them, you neither confirm nor deny, but you can use whatever conforms with. So it takes a bit of knowledge to understand that some part of the Bible may have been applicable, but it's absolutely correct and pristine purity preserved, but might not be applicable anymore and later on changed. There's that factor as well. But it no longer applies or has been superseded later on. It applied at that time. But a bit of knowledge to know that that is no longer in conformity with what Islam says now in the current, the latest revelation we will claim. So in principle, there will be nothing wrong with what our gentlemen say, the 10 Commandments, or love thy neighbor. I actually brought 3-4 traditions of the Prophet, peace be on him, saying, you will not succeed. You will never go to paradise until your neighbors are saved from your harm. And neighbors could be Jews, Christians, even your enemies. And secondly, you have only done well if your neighbors say you have done well. So how they perceive is quite important, a bit like the race laws now. If you perceive something to be a racist comment, it's perception that counts. If the people perceive the Muslims to be harming them, that's what counts according to the hadith. But at the end of the day, we can just accept, use what conforms with Islam. But then, how do we know we have understood Islam properly? Because there are differences. Absolute things are clear. Prophet said, God is loving. Christians will say God is love. But there are nuances of differences, isn't it? So in principle we can agree. But we would say God didn't love so much that he gave his only begotten Son to die on the cross. That would sound like blasphemy to the Christians. But to Muslims, to say that God is a son or even an incarnate, he came incarnate, is blasphemy to us. But we will both agree God is loving. So in practical terms, that could be a philosophical discussion. Practical terms, can't we get on? Your God is loving, my God is loving. Same God we're talking about. Isn't it? So must we hate and must we always throw bricks at each other's houses? No. It is a bit complicated.
We've got time for one last question. One last question. Okay, go ahead.
There is a hadith that comes to mind based on the question that the lady asked.
Thank you.
I'm hoping you can maybe explain it better than myself.
Probably not.
Maybe give me the correct understanding of it. By reading it, some may say it sounds a bit harsh, but others might say you're taking it out of context. But I want to just say how I feel it is and from what I read. There was an instance when Umar bin Khattab, all Muslims in the United States, Umar bin Khattab, and you mentioned it as well in the book, he was sitting by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the messenger, he was about to read the Quran, and the messenger told him not to read it. And he said that even if Musa alayhi salam was here today, he'd have no choice but to follow me. So if you just explain what he did.
Yeah, that's an incident where he actually brought pages from the Torah. And the point is, the way we understood it, and we have been taught, is that that was a time when the revelation hadn't been completed yet. Okay? It's still in the process of completion. And even at that time, there are a number of traditions which actually forbade the people from writing down the hadith, as well as not write the hadith in the same page as the Quran. So there was a time when things are being still not completed. I want to keep the Quran separate. And until the whole process has terminated, you don't want to adulterate it with even the Prophet's statement, his own, let alone from Old Testament or New Testament. That's one of the understanding. And they actually said, by Allah, I brought you this fresh as an egg, warm. You know, like Moses kind of, had he been alive, he would have no recourse but to follow me. And that strengthens the position that we need to consolidate our understanding and adherence to the final revelation first. Once we feel secure and we think it's complete, we know that the thing is complete and it's perfected for us, then you can take knowledge is the lost property, or wisdom is the lost property of a Muslim. Wherever he finds it, he can take it. He certainly can take from the Bible as well. But he would know how to use it. So it's a cautionary thing.
The benchmark or the framework will come from Islam. So whatever we take after that, we can put it into context.
Yes.
Islam tells us.
Because I have read the Gospels, for example, and I didn't see any, except Gospel of John, but Matthew, Mark, and Luke. I read those three, and I interpreted as I read in terms of Tawheed, and I said, it's fine, it's talking about Tawheed. But it's not fine. It's not talking about Tawheed, is it? Because I'm dealing with the Muslim spectacles, isn't it? Just like that. I can take and I can borrow. And I like the quotation from Jesus Christ, peace be on him, not until you become innocent like these children, you should by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. Because I interpret that, because that's what Allah loves and wants, us to be innocent in the heart. That doesn't mean I become a Christian now. That's one good thing about our interfaith discussion in Ipswich and Suffolk, that we, whether Christians or Buddhists or Muslims, we don't, actually not trying to all have a mishmash or something and let's all give up some fundamentals and all hug each other. It's not like that. The Christians are very ardent Christians. And they can preach, I said preach and, give the good news and message. We are not compromising on the fundamentals, but we have respect. We both want good in life. And we want to get on for the common aims which we know God adores. And we can discuss about God as much as we can, but get on with the real needs in society. Truthfulness, to respect of elders, to anything else.
So we'll end it there. Thank you for Muntasir, for your talk and answering all the questions.
I brought some booklets, only about 50, 60 copies. I'll link them, but Nabil said I could do that when I come to talks and things. Inshallah. So one is a booklet on Zakat, one is a booklet that describes, well, it's just a standing order from in the middle. Your students, you raise £350,000. If you can raise £3.50 a month from one of you, that would be perfect on just giving side. But your friends, your families, you have, a piece of an Islamic center you can own in paradise, as it were, by contributing from your friend or family, £5 a month or something. We bought it for £350,000 in cash after saving for 30 years. Those of people who know me, Nabil knows, we never took a penny from the council, the government, or foreign sources. Everything from our pocket. After 30 years, we bought this derelict church and an arson attack, and we know why it was done. But never mind, it wasn't insured, so no scam going on. And we need to restore the roof. It's like in ruins, so you can come and visit it. You want an Islamic center or a mosque, and so the church will not become a mosque, something else next to it. You can contribute, inshallah. You can get your friends and family to start contributing to something as vital as that. We don't have 30 more years. Do you think I'll live 30 years? Do you think I'll be, inshallah, of course, but be realistic. You know, I'm 53. I'm diabetic, I'm a heart patient. Come on. So, and then what? Okay, at the age of 80, I restore this place, and then do what? You know, hobble in a wheelchair. So we need to have this place. It's a wonderful. If you come to it, you'll see what wonderful work carries on there. So I'll leave those two booklets by your grace and permission. If you can do something about them.
Thank you, and thank you all for coming today and for participating in the question and answer.